Hello. Hopefully people can hear me and see this adorable cat who has once again decided that she has to open the show. I guess she's figured out that Monday is a good day to come and ask for the patting. Right, Pugh? Okay, you look very, very thoughtful there for a minute. Show everybody how cute you are. I don't know if you can hear the purring. Unfortunately, I don't think I can get the mic any closer. Or the cat closer to the mic. There's Quindy and Higzilla and Green Users. And everybody is enjoying Kitty. Hi. Yes, Kitty loves to do that. And Kitty has a very, very raspy tongue. Our other cat has just, you can barely feel it when he licks you. It's so weird that he has such a softer tongue compared to this one. But he gave us an interesting day yesterday. So we went out to see a movie, went to see Guardians of the Galaxy 3 finally. And we come back and I'm walking through the kitchen and I'm like, those sure look like some feathers on the floor there. I'm like, well, there's one. Okay, if there's two, that's not, because my husband was like, maybe we dragged it in on our shoe. And I'm like, I don't think so. Outside is wet and these feathers are dry. So I started looking around and we're looking around and I'm like, I know there's a body here somewhere. Like he wouldn't have eaten the whole bird. And then finally this cat showed us where the sad little bird body was. Now, in case you haven't been here on this show before, this is an indoor cat who was inside the entire time we were at the movies, but we have a screened-in porch, and this is the third time now, I think, a bird has gotten inside the screen. And Corbin is very much a mighty hunter, so these birds do not live long enough to understand the true regret of their choices, I guess. The second time he did it, I had just let him out on the porch, and we keep a wooden bar in the bottom of the door, so you can't force the door open. I mean, you could break it, obviously, but making it a little harder at any rate. So it's like a kitty-sized in and out, but a human doesn't fit through. And so I let him out, and then I saw that there was a bird on there, and I saw him start to go for it, and before I could get that wooden bar out and get the door open and try to get him back in, it was already over for the bird. So I was like, okay, you're really, really very good at that. And even being middle-aged and lazy has not stopped him being really, really good at that. So I guess we've saved a lot of birds by not letting him outside more the way he was when we found him as a stray. Higzilla was suggesting that the kitty should stay inside because it's too hot to be outside. Kitty loves it hot. That kitty loves it hot. She has been very cranky the past few weeks because we've had a rainy, cold beginning of summer, and while everyone else in the house is perfectly happy about that, she's like, where'd my sun go? Where'd my baking go? Because she will come and yell at us when she doesn't like the weather. As if we could fix it. Which we cannot. All right, so last week I was putting some finishing touches on these, although this one still isn't completely finished. Basically, I was doing the base on this, although he's also not completely finished. And we were talking about how it's not uncommon for some of us to kind of get to the last 80% or so, and then just, you don't finish it. So we were talking about some of the reasons for that and why it's good to push through and finish it. I'm going to just move this up even a little more so that the whole miniature is behind the thing. I'm probably not going to work on these anymore. I brought them over mostly just to show what we talked about last week in case you want to go watch the video on demand, and I'm now remembering I actually didn't do the membranes on the wings either. But as I was saying, in case you realize that you want to go watch the video on demand, or I'm pretty sure Quindy's going to be helpful and put up Reaper's YouTube channel where there's a playlist for every show and you can go watch previous episodes. So this lady still has a couple of all the kind of NMM trim, and then the boss. I feel like I should know what the the name of that part of the shield is, but it's escaping my old brain right now. Does not have that finished, but I probably won't work much on these, but they're here just in case. What I have instead is Ron had to send me something. There weren't any secret miniatures in it. There is something else I'm going to show you, but don't get hopeful. It was on a topic other than miniatures. But he put in a pack of, this is this month's mini of the month, which if you make a minimum order on the Reaper website, you will get this included with your order. And I think you can just order one if you want to. You should be able to get there off the front page to this figure who is, I kept the card so that I would be able to tell you the SKU number and the name. And there he is. The Wasp Nettle Lizardman Archer. So I thought I would paint him, and one of the reasons is this is another one of the 3D prints. So I did the overladen henchwoman a few months ago, and this is another print. I did want to put primer on it. It's resin, and I put primer on resin, and I kind of am feeling the same way about Bones USA now. So I don't prime Bones Original or Bones Black, but I do prime Bones USA and the 3D printed ones. So, but I took a couple of pictures before I prepped it, which I had to do very little prep for that. And I can talk more about prep in just a minute, but I will show you the pictures so you can see. This thing here is an artifact of the 3D printing, and basically I just kind of put something behind it and it popped right off. It didn't even leave a mark. So it's not even attached on his hand at all. This is another artifact of the 3D printing. The main thing I had to work on were like, excuse me, these little dots just a bit on the bow. I think there were a couple of places. So this is, I mean, he's not perfectly cleaned up. There may be some of these little strut support type dots that I missed. But on the other hand, look, there's this complicated surface and there are no mold lines that I had to deal with there, which is just delightful. I primed him pretty dark because I figure I'm going to try to go fast and go from dark to light. So there's from the back. There wasn't really anything on the back. There were like a couple little places where I had to cut a thing off. But really, it took but seconds. The priming took longer. But I just wanted to show him kind of straight out of the blister. But I didn't want you all to have to wait for me to clean and then prime him to start. And I found a site. I just decided to go looking for lizards. I was like, I always paint lizards green, that kind of thing. Is there something else? And originally I was looking for like weird poisonous lizards or something. But then I decided I wasn't super into that. So this is a website. I don't actually own this picture or anything, so I'm going to show the whole site with the blue spiny lizard. I don't know how representative he is. Some of them do have some of this teal type thing on their backs, but he has it in a very distinct pattern, and I liked that idea. Also, the arms are more of a yellow-green, and then this is like a brown, maybe a little bit khaki green. When I started looking at khaki green paints, I'm like, no, I really feel like it is more brown. So I picked out these paints, and that just seemed like an interesting challenge to have the more saturated teal color, the slightly more saturated green yellow, and then the less saturated brown khaki type color. So that's one of the kinds of contrast is having saturated things with less saturated things. So the back pattern is really cool, but what I want for this guy is not to have any of that show kind of from the main angles where you would look at him, and then incorporate some of that teal on the face so that because that's higher saturation, it's going to draw more attention. So if I use that on the face and I don't put it like on the arms or legs, like I could do it on these plates and kind of adapt the color scheme, but I'd rather not do that. I don't mind if something's stealing a bit of attention on the back, but from the front, I want to work out a way to use that teal to put the focus on his face. I see now that he does have a lot of these plates, so those may be, and a place where I missed putting the primer. And what did I do with the primer? Oops, sorry for popping the camera. So I'll just put a little bit extra primer there, partly for getting the color the same all over it. I'm probably going to do a darker wash on the part that's meant to be brown, but I'm thinking about now whether I want these plate areas to be lighter in value than the overall brown scales. But I might need to look at my example dude again. I should put that primer way at the back. All right. This is very common for me to miss spots, but I did think I double checked. Hopefully that's everywhere now. Actually, I think there's a little bit in there, but those are like sticks, spiky type things. So I will be deciding at a later date what color those are. Well, later time, not later date. Let me look at my sample guy again. We do not see his tummy at all. I think maybe using that yellowy green might work well. So Valander is saying, one of these quarters, I'd like to see you go through the quarterly contest entries and talk about what you like about them. If I did that, I really would only talk about what I like about them. I'm not comfortable giving other people's work a strong critique. That is why I use my own. Even there, I mean, you know, sometimes people don't like if you talk about your stuff. Presumably, if you've entered a contest, you are expecting people to make comments and talk about your stuff. But sometimes you think you're okay with something, and then you get there and you're less okay with it than you thought. So that is one of the, because people are always asking, and if you're coming to ReaperCon, people often ask, well, couldn't you kind of do a panel where the judges sit and talk about the entries and give like kind of, you know, big critiques so that everyone can hear them and benefit from it. And it's like, not without potentially upsetting someone in a way that we are loath to want to do. So I totally get the impulse, and absolutely I think it's valuable to hear. Sometimes you can learn more with critiques from somebody else's stuff because you're not, you know, you don't have as much of a personal connection to it. You can kind of step back and look at it more impassively. So it's like not at all a terrible suggestion from the point of being a learning experience. It's just, you know, how do we realistically do that given human beings are human beings? And it's supposed to be a fun experience. And definitely people who've entered the MSP Open haven't necessarily said, you know, critique this to the world. I mean, at least on, well, okay, I'm not sure if I've checked on the new format for the quarterly contest. Can you still make comments? Or do you just kind of like the ones that you like the best and then move on? I don't actually remember offhand. I know I have looked at it, but no, it's just a vote. So see, there I'd start to feel less comfortable again, because when it was Facebook and it's posted pictures and you can comment under pictures, you know that you're opening yourself up to that by entering, but it's not impossible that someone has chosen to enter because now you can't do that. So I would have to ponder that. If I were only to say nice things, that might make it a little more doable. So it's absolutely like a valid question, and I get why you're asking. And I know it seems like maybe we're being over scrupulous, and wouldn't most people just love to have feedback. But it's one of those things where most people who've been in the position of giving feedback have been in the situation of hurting someone's feelings or hearing later that what we thought was, you know, a kind and reasoned way to mention things was taken as like a brutal takedown kind of thing. So it's tough. Like you want everybody to be happy and everything, but really learning requires that you figure out what's not great about something, as well as what is. I think it is very important for people doing critiques to mention the good stuff, because if you don't, someone could just go, well, they didn't say anything about that, so I guess it's not great, and I won't do it that way anymore, when they're fine on that front, and it's something else that they need to think about adapting or changing what they do. Because a lot of people they just want to paint and share their things and know that someone else thought it was kind of cool. Like, they're not necessarily motivated the same way I am. Like, I get kind of bored if I'm just not trying to improve. But a lot of people are like, I just want to have fun. I don't want to feel like I'm being judged. And they shouldn't. Like, I do not like this thing that's very prevalent in our culture, where if you do something kind of artistic, like anything like dancing, singing, any kind of visual arts, there's this idea that you shouldn't be doing that unless you're good at it. Like, those aren't things that you do just for fun. You should be trying to get good, and then you should be trying to monetize it on top of that. And I completely disagree with this philosophy. But it is definitely a thing that's out there. And so, understandably, people are sensitive. Sometimes people are still sensitive because, you were working on something in school and the teacher was really harsh, or the kid said something, or your mom said something. Like, it's just, a lot of people have feelings related to having stuff like that critiqued. So we generally, at least among the people I know, take the approach of, you need to be really, really sure that the person actually wants it. And certainly asking someone whether they wish to be critiqued in public is yet again a different thing. So even on my blog, I have very rarely included photographs of other people's miniatures. I started doing it a little bit more. But as a rule, to point out positive things that I'm not great at, like, I'll rip my own stuff to shreds all day long. I do think it's how you learn. And oftentimes I'm talking about miniatures that are so old that I'm like, not really super invested in having painted that thing, as it were. Are these like... I'm trying to make some decisions about what is where. So, like, I'm going to make his chest, even though it's not scaly, I'm going to kind of make it the same skin tone as the main areas. But these plates, I feel like I want to have somewhat differently. And then, does it continue on to the top of the foot or not, is my debate. And one answer to this is certainly to go look at real animals, but if you're trying to paint something quickly and for fun, maybe you don't want to spend too much time doing that. So, I'm making some stuff up. Let me let that dry a little while I make some more decisions. Ballender was expecting that I would want to say only what I did like about them, and that is why he phrased the comment that way. It was also an opportunity to kind of discuss that in general, because I'm sure sometimes people wonder, if you're trying to be educational and help people improve and stuff, why don't I ever talk about other people's problems, as it were. But yeah, I think Quindy's right. If I've suspended my Patreon. If I restart it, I'll probably add a level where people can get critiques. And I was debating having two levels, one that's a little less expensive, but you are submitting with the knowledge that I will be able to share that critique publicly for the benefit of others. And then another level where you pay a little bit more, but I am spending all of that time and attention just on you. And then I would be comfortable doing it. Sometimes if I'm planning for like a specific class or something, I have friends that I might say, hey, do you have like old miniatures that you did X on that you don't mind me ripping to shreds for a class? But most of the time, this is why I'm going in my own back catalog when I talk about here's what sucks. And I suck a lot, so it is a fruitful area of discussion. But there are some things, like when I was trying to show you some of the basing problems, and I had figured most of that stuff out before I made the mistakes and had miniatures to show, so I didn't have examples of that. So it's not a perfect system. I don't make all the mistakes, I just make an awful lot of mistakes. All right, so that's kind of the brownie thing. Well, while that's drying, I will actually show the other thing that Ron sent me, which is somewhat related and why I didn't mind prepping the other guy, because Ron sent me some of these to look at. Are they too cute or what? So these are also 3D prints, and I would say the easiest way to tell if there's no like super obvious artifacts is if you see little dots on the bottom, that those were the support struts. I mean, I think you can see it on the camera. There's little adorable flowers and like veins on the wings. The little, I mean, it's not fur when it's an insect, but you know, it kind of feels like fur, or feels like it looks like fur. And there's some of those things, but this is, if you didn't see the previous episode, because when he sent me I forget what her actual name was. It was something the overladen henchwoman. Marina the overladen henchwoman. When he sent me Marina, he sent 3 copies, and so I prepped one of them on stream so that you could see how I do it. And I might do that with these. So this is the mini of the month for next month. So it's kind of a preview, but I might paint, prep and paint one of these next month. The cuteness is just killing me. It's so adorable. I can't even. Got a cute little shield thing built in, so that'll be nice and easy to paint. This is by Jason, of course, Jason Wiebe. And I'm just showing you the same figure but multiple copies because they're unlike mold miniatures where it tends to be, if you've ever had to prep 20 or 50 of the same mold miniature, which I have done for classes, you start to learn like, okay, there's gonna be a mold line on this part of the thigh, and there's gonna be like a weird little thing over here, and you can kind of watch for those things when you're working in bulk. But because of the way these are made, which I don't know what that way is, I'm hoping I get to find out more about it when we're down there for ReaperCon. It'll be slightly different in a lot of cases where the little dots show up, or like for some reason this guy has a slightly curved spear. I suspect that I could heat that with my hairdryer and get that sorted out. It might be, if I'm painting it like a thorn, it might be kind of interesting to not have it all be the same. Oh, look, an ant. That's exciting. So I just wanted to show more than one of them so you could see. Hey, Miniatures Den and Raiders. Oh, that's a lot of Raiders. Right now I'm showing Reaper's Miniature of the Month for next month, which is a 3D print. Like everyone gets a 3D print. This isn't a master or anything. And Ron at Reaper sent me a few, so I just thought I would show people what they look like. I'd say straight out of the blister, but they weren't in a blister. They were just in a little baggie. Because I don't think they've been packed up yet. But I will prep one of these and paint it next month. But the mini of this month, and the Reaper Miniature of the Month, is something that you'll get free with a minimum purchase order on reapermini.com, or you can just go buy one. And this is this month's miniature, which is also a 3D print. So there's some kind of mass production method for 3D prints now. I know zero about how this works technically, and I think that's nifty because there's no mold lines, so I wanted to paint him. Also, this is not the kind of thing I paint a lot, so it might be interesting. I mean, I've done a few lizardy people. I have some very bright ones of the, what are those? Troglodytes. There's like 3 or 4 troglodytes, and I've done 2 of them. I have to do the third because I'm doing complementary colors on each of them. So one was green and magenta, one was blue and orange, and I still have to do yellow and purple. I have them set aside and stuff. I just haven't gotten around to doing it. Just the power of complementary colors. Seemed like it'd be a nice way to kind of have an example of that. But this guy, I decided to work on more the idea of just subtle differences in saturation, using that to add visual interest and draw the viewer's eyes around. That's a form of contrast that I think, I don't know, to me it does seem like a little more complicated than, you know, just making something darker, making something lighter. So I don't always, I mean, I use that form of contrast, but I don't always use it a lot. And I thought this would be an interesting opportunity to play with that. I'm just darkening up a little some of the crevice areas that I'm not really planning to do much in. Just try to smooth it away a little. Maybe it's easier to get his armpit over here. Quindy has added the link in chat where you can follow Miniatures Den, and Miniatures Den also does a show on here Wednesdays at, I'm going to say 1:30 Reaper time, which is Central, and Quindy will correct me if I'm wrong. I'm pretty sure Quindy wishes that wasn't her job, to correct me when I'm wrong all the time. But alas, here we are. Make sure that's the brush I want. Some days I feel fussier about brush than others. 1, right after Anne. So right after Anne finishes, Anne streams every day from 11:30 to 1, apparently. But on Wednesdays, you can just keep watching and enjoy Luca from Miniatures Den. Which I highly recommend doing. I do not highly recommend throwing the miniature around. Let's get in the hand, actually. Because I do not know if I got primer all up in there. So I definitely want to make sure that that has a nice shadow. All right, so now my idea was to have a khaki brown. So what did I pick out for my khaki browns? I mixed the initial dark color was part wood stain brown and part blue liner. Adding blue liner to brown, it makes a nice darker color usually. So then I will start with my wood stain brown. So wood stain brown is part of a triad with shield brown and then driftwood brown. And when I looked at it, shield brown's a great color and I like it a lot, but it seemed too saturated for what I was going for. Quindy says, Luca charges in and kicks Anne off the stream on Wednesdays. And then if I wish to get lighter in color, I kind of have 2 choices. I can go with these like greeny, gray, browny. Or I could go creamier. I'm not going to go creamier because I'll be doing a section that's kind of more yellow-green. I'm going to save the creamier for that. This is my theory anyway. Will this work? I don't know. That's what we do on this show, is I have a half-baked idea that I don't research enough, and I do it on live and encourage you to not worry about making mistakes, and or do plan in advance, and don't be like me. I'm not sure if I even will want this to look a little greener when I'm done. Alas, there were some khaki green colors in the Reaper line, but alas, as far as I could tell, they were all amongst the cancel colors. Well, there might have been like a lighter one, but the darker ones were canceled for sure. So I didn't want to grab those. So if I end up needing things to be lighter, I will deal with it later. All right, I'm not sure I showed all these. So that darkest one is Woodstone. This is Terran Khaki. Driftwood Brown is in the middle, and then the lightest color I have right now is Khaki Highlight. So these go together, but their Shadow was one of the cancel colors. Alas, it's a cool color. But maybe we'll get something similar someday. Or we'll all be encouraged to mix more. All right, didn't I water that down too much? Since I'm going to be kind of side brushing and that kind of thing, I don't want the paint too watery. But this one felt kind of a little thickened up when it came out of the bottle, which often happens to colors that have more white in white points. Is this brush too big? I'll give it a shot. Maybe not. I'm not like too stressed out about whether, only staying on the tops of those the raised scales. It's not the kind of scale where it's overlapping and it's got, it's not this kind of scale. I mean, I know this is scale mail, but there are snakes and dragons and stuff sculpted with that kind of scale as well. It's more like a bumpy protrusion than a classic scale. So I'm not too stressed out about it leaving stuff in the, I actually should start with this one. Leaving stuff in the, around every one of these dots. It's not that kind of detail in my mind, at least, and I don't feel like I need to approach it that way. If I need to, I can come back with a wash later and pull some of that detail out, or just kind of come under with a fine brush and pull some of that detail out. But right now, that is not how I'm inclined to do it. Actually, I shouldn't go too nuts on his arms because I was going to do something a little different on the arms, but maybe I should do that on his chest instead, because I don't have to follow my inspiration lizard, who I think was called the spiny blue lizard, and is apparently found in Texas, but I don't think that's its main area, so it's probably coming up. It's probably like the northern edge of its territory would be my guess. I didn't have time to read the whole article before I wandered in, before it was time to do the show. So although I care about this texture, I care about it as a secondary element. Right now, it's more important to me to think about the form and shape of the, why is the light not seem very bright? Sorry, I don't know what's happening there. I thought I actually bumped up the brightness before I started, but it's acting a little weird now. So right now I'm more interested in making this leg look like it's a cylinder, making this tail look like it's a cylinder, making these arms look like they're cylinders. Maybe bringing out some of that muscle detail after once I got like the cylinder thing done. And then the fact that there's texture on the skin is nice, and I want to do something about that, but it's important to get those other things first. So if you just pay attention to texture, you can have something that doesn't look as rounded and shapely as it should, because your lights and shadows are applied based on the texture rather than the shape of the object. And you can kind of do both, depending on the type of texture. There. So as I get lighter, I can try and just be using the side of the brush to pull the paint off onto those larger bumps. I feel like there's probably an anatomical name for that, that if Julie is still in chat, Julie would know. But I do not. Oh, no. I'm doing a very good job keeping him in focus today, am I? What is going on with the light? So I'm still dealing with my nerve pinch situation, and it really did not love me painting last week. But I'm hoping that as things have been getting better, I can get back to doing it more. And not just for the show. So normally I tell you not to move the angle of the brush because you're trying to build up that brush memory of making the same stroke. But in this case, I'm trying to focus on the upper areas and then leave a little bit of darkness in between the texture. So moving the brush around can help with that. And it's a different kind of stroke, so it's not. There's still muscle memory and aim and stuff, I guess, but it's slightly different thing. Julie, so these kinds of scales are like bumps on the surface rather than like overlapping type scales like that, like certain snakes have. And I'm assuming there's a name for those kind of like, I don't know, skin bumps or something. Skin bumps will not be the name for sure. And that if there is a more anatomical name, that you would know what it is, having studied so many real creatures. Oh, and Green Users is doing scales right now, and they're fighting her. So the theme of today is scales. I guess, except I think these aren't scales, and they're the whatever the other thing is called. So there, I'm even going into the crevices a little bit on some of these areas that are like very upward facing. They shouldn't have super dark paint in the crevices, even if they're recessed, they're still getting more light compared to, the recesses that are facing to the side or downwards. think I'm gonna do the hands with the more yellowy color, so I'm gonna leave those. And the feet, the back of the feet are this color. We're gonna say the back of the leg too. I mean, you could probably argue that it's the spinier thing, but for the sake of expediency, I will not be arguing that. Is this too big a jump? We'll find out. As I'm getting lighter, I'm taking more effort to not go into those crevices if I can, especially in places where the scale bumps, or whatever we're going to call them, are nice and prominently sculpted. And now I'm starting to bring out the details with it. So the arm's a cylinder, but within that cylinder, you've got a bicep, tricep, those kinds of things. Now I'm starting to bring those out. So I went up several colors before those kind of became big enough details to treat separately than the overall cylinder, the shape, form. So I know form sounds like all arty and pretentious, but it's like a shape is a 2D thing and a form is a 3D thing. So a shape is a circle and a form is a sphere. And with miniatures, I mean, obviously this is a three-dimensional object, but they're small enough that if you don't have enough bright light on them, you won't see the form as three-dimensionally. So it kind of flattens and it becomes kind of half a shape and half a form. Julie's saying that those kinds of scales are called Gila monster scales. So I'm guessing that Gila monsters have them. And I probably should have looked at some Gila monsters before I started doing this, instead of blue spiny lizards. And I found this really funky lizard, and now I can't remember what it was called. But it's like, it was funky. It had like green and turquoise and yellow, and I'm like, okay, I think you have a lot more going on than I can deal with in even multiple streams. Because I'm not sure if I'm going to have the illusion that I will finish this today, because if you have been here before, you can go ahead and, take bets with the people who haven't been here before about whether I'll finish in a single session. It has been done, but not often. Most often with limited palette figures, because once you have the limited palette mixed, there's no mixing, it's just boom, 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 apply as appropriate to the values that you want. Zachariah is finished with meetings, which everybody likes to be finished with meetings, I'm sure. Well, I guess not. Somebody must really love meetings, or else they'd stop making them longer than they should be. I think I read once that people can pay, close attention for about an hour and a half, and then their brain is kind of cooked, and they need to not do that for a while. But I'm pretty sure that a lot of people who hold meetings did not hear that same thing. The underside, no, see, the underside of his arms aren't scaly, so I'm gonna come back down to some of my previous mixes, and I'm not gonna treat these like the chest and leg plates, so I need to get a little color and they have a slightly different texture. So I'm just going to try to use the brush a little more striated. Now that part has to dry. I'll do some striations on this section of his leg too. So kind of the same color palette, just slightly different texturing. I don't want to go too nuts with different colors on him. That will definitely make it hopeless for me to finish up more promptly. All right, so now I'm up to my lighter colors, and this is meant to be a fairly dark value area. So now it is kind of detail stuff. It's bringing out those finer forms with the muscles and bringing out the little Gila monster texture. I want to limit my location for these to be fairly tight in comparison, or it's not going to look dark anymore. It already actually may not look dark enough. I might have to come back with some of the darker color. We'll see. It's hard to tell when it's the only color that is on the object. But it will help the brighter colors. There's a yellowy green that's a bit more saturated than this, and then a teal that's also more saturated than this. There will be even more contrast if those are lighter in value, which they are on my sample little blue spiny lizard. So I'm just stealing that idea. I think I forgot to do anything to this hand. Zachariah has 10 meetings scheduled tomorrow. Oh my goodness, that's just insane. Quinny says, at my previous job, I used to try to get invited to extra meetings that I didn't need to be in because it gave me somewhere to be where no one could constantly come in and ask me 10 million questions. So I could sit there peacefully with my laptop and get things done. I duck a fleck of flame. Yeah, I guess whatever the problems are at your work, you gotta find the workaround. Unless the problem is having to go to too many meetings, and there doesn't seem to be a workaround for that. Oh, right, I was trying to work on this hand because I had forgotten all about the Gila monster part, and that will go into the other color that I will hopefully get to work. Do just a little bit of this lighter. Here I'm actually making dots to try to reinforce that support the texture that is sculpted. And we'll see. I may have gone too light with this, but as I say, I think it's hard enough to judge when you don't have much on the figure that I'm just going to leave it for now and change it if I need to later. I am realizing that normally this is the color that I would paint the bow. So now I'm going to have to ponder whether I do that or not. Zachariah is a terrible multitasker. Yeah, most of us are, I think. I think research supports the idea that we're not as great at that as we think we are. So I kind of wanted this color, but I started putting this marking on the colors that are canceled so that I know that they're canceled before I use them for things. So I thought I would attempt to mix something similar with, I got ogre skin and olive green. And I wonder, maybe I should try with the oxide yellow first. This is nice and bright, but I'm worried about whether it's a little transparent. But we'll see. We'll see what happens when I start mixing. A little bit of both. Because if I go back to my inspiration guy, the yellow-green parts aren't like crazy yellow-green. Like they're not this yellow. They probably are more like that kind of yellow. But we'll see what happens when I mix. There's for sure white in this, so it might be too dull if I use this yellow. But that's the other thing we do on the show is I waste all my paint, so you don't have to feel as... Well, I mean, I'm trying to encourage you to use my paint. I think you can be too miserly and not do yourself any favors. If you're like, you know, counting every single little drop and stuff. Yeah, that darker, less saturated yellow is not having a strong effect on the mix. All right, now there's a mosquito. First we had ants, now we have mosquitoes. So how does that compare to, not bad, it's a little darker. I got some gutter grime to be a darker version. Quinty, oh, I would just straight up tell people I was doing other things and had no idea what the meeting was even about. I did pay attention to the ones that I was supposed to be in, mostly. And then to go lighter, bit of that, more of this, but also that's why I brought over these like creamy yellow type colors. Let's see if one of them works for going lighter and keeping some yellow. So as I get, kind of the mid-tone is where you're going to have the most saturation, because as soon as you do start adding white, you're desaturating a color. But in this case, it's still, that's still pretty bright. And that's why I picked these, because I have a bit of yellow in it. I could just get white and just add more of this too, which, let's add a little bit more of that. Let's add a little bit more of that here. But generally, if you're just adding white to something, it's really gonna start getting too dull. Like when we're working on Pastel Rocky, I had to add a lot of whites to make it work, because the pastel colors were more desaturated than I realized until I started working on them. But if you're having a case where you're trying to mix white into something and you don't want it to be going as desaturated as it is, add some more color. So like if you're mixing highlights for red, you would add a little orange and then maybe yellow in with your white. Now the problem is trying to remember which one I'm supposed to be using. Because I definitely learned that I'm not the, if there are people who can multitask, they are not me. I can barely one task. So streaming is always a fun challenge for me because I'm already not great at keeping multiple pieces of information in my head. And now I'm supposed to walk and chew bubblegum at the same time. But I got to figure that's part of the amusement value for you all. I have to admit that I did not put enough thought into, all right, if he's these colors, what color should his equipment be? So that's a problem for Lear. Did anyone get this guy? Make an order this month and get this guy. Check him out yourself. Just debating what goes where. Yeah, I'm gonna do this part of the face and then do the teal on the upright spines. Maybe I'll do the teal there too. And hopefully, since there will be then two saturated things that kind of clash a little on his face, that will make his face the center of attention. Zachariah, I got a couple of him. He'll be part of my lizard brigade for D&D. So some players are about to have a bad day with some lizards. So that's what I'm hearing. Right, the leg plates are the other place this goes. And here I'll have to be careful because this is not, you know, his legs and his feet are not an area of attention. So I have to think about the fact that I'm using colors that are meant to grab attention in places that shouldn't have too much attention. And how will I handle that? And I will probably handle that by adjusting the value. So having darker values here than I end up with here. But if necessary, I can also glaze over it to reduce the saturation. Or glaze over this to increase the saturation. Or both. Because glazing is a relatively quick fix. To me, I know there are people who hate glazing. I have to admit it's one of those things I don't understand why, but I get that it's true, even if I don't personally understand it. I'm checking. I'm pretty sure if I do the teal all along there, that the way the tail is positioned, it should not be visible from my main angle. As Michael Proctor likes to call it, the money shot. And it is good, especially if you are entering something online, like the quarterly contest that is currently up for votes on, I don't know if Quindy has, yeah, Quindy's popped a link in there. If you are watching this later on YouTube, I mean, voting's probably over, but if you want to go find out about the quarterly contest to try to participate in the next one, go to the Reaper Facebook page, like Reaper Miniatures Facebook page, Facebook group, and search for quarterly contest, and there should be links there to where you need to go. And the way the quarterly contest works is everybody has the same miniature to paint. So the person who won the previous quarterly contest picks the miniature for the next quarterly contest, and anyone who wants to enter paints that figure. And I believe entries must be made anonymously. That's why it's on another site now. And then viewers vote. And the three that get the most votes. Oh, Quindy didn't even do that. The bot was just listening to me because AI, I guess, and popped that in. But I think it's the top three win something, or at least get accolades in the announcements and whatnot. Since I paint for Reaper, I don't think it's appropriate that I enter that. So I'm not necessarily, I try to go vote in it, but I'm not necessarily completely up to date on all the factual information. Entries are anonymous on the voting page, Zachariah is confirming. However, it asks for your name when you submit it. Yeah, no, you're not anonymous to the contest, but people are supposed to be voting without knowing, hey, I know that guy, I'm going to give him extra votes kind of thing. So that you genuinely vote for what you like the best. And I love that kind of contest because when everybody's working on the same thing, it's so fascinating to see all of the different ways that people interpret it. Sometimes there'll be kind of trends of things that are similar, but they're still their own unique interpretation. And sometimes it's like everyone will be radically different each from the next. And I think it's fascinating. And it's easier to compare when everybody's working on the same figure, different approaches, different styles, different color schemes, like how much difference a color scheme can make. It's very effective to look at the same miniature painted with a lot of different color schemes to kind of get some idea, kind of study, okay, what impact is color having? Does this one feel like it has a different mood than that one because of the colors that the painter chose, that kind of thing. Even from if you're interested in like more technical aspects of painting, it's 100% a great type of contest to look at, and not that common anymore. I feel like when I first started painting, that kind of contest was a little more common on the internet, or maybe just people were doing challenges and stuff. So it's an interesting opportunity. I mean, if you go look at something like Golden Demon, there will often be multiple of the, there'll be like a figure that, 3 or 4 people might have done the same figure, and then multiple ones of those, and that's interesting to look at too. But I recommend participating in the quarterly contest as, for the fun creative challenge of it and stuff. But even if you don't want to participate, it's worth going over and looking at them and voting and just getting like some inspiration and examples and stuff of the power of color and other choices. I mean, people make different basing choices. There'll be some people will do like source light or something like that. It's very cool to see the different things that people do. Sometimes people will do funny ones, other people will do like serious ones. I'm sure some people are following whatever the canonical interpretation of that creature or character type might be, and other people are not caring about that. And it's just very interesting to me. Maybe it's not interesting to everyone, but it's very interesting to me. So I definitely need to, I meant to click the link. I think I was on my phone was the problem. I was on the phone and I saw the link and I'm like, oh, I have to remember to go on my computer and click the link so I can vote. Oh, and Zachariah is pointing out something important. You can vote for as many as you like. So you don't have to go through the whole thing and go, okay, this one is my absolute favorite. Anyone that you think is cool, vote for it. And then let the computer do the math, because that's what they're there for. Zachariah also enjoys the variety of the entries. And it can push your creativity if you're entering a contest and you know that everybody else is doing the same figure. It's like, well, I guess I can't just go look at the monster manual or whatever. Maybe I should try to come up with a super cool idea for that. Did I do that hand? No, I did that hand. I didn't do this hand. But yes, I believe Zachariah also confirmed that the top 3 people win things. My guess is gift certificates at reapermini.com. But then the first place person also has the honor of choosing the next miniature, which so you really have no idea what's going to be. People are all over the map, and what they are like, I would love to see 50 people paint X. Go. Green users entered the quarterly contest when I was in a slump. It got me to think about and paint something. That's Julie, not Bob, although Bob also paints. And Julie did very well, if I recall correctly. Did you win completely? Were you the first place winner? I'm trying to remember now. Zachariah entered it, but took, in hindsight, a bad photo. Yeah, That's the thing about online contests is dealing with the dang photo. But the reason I started talking about that is the idea of the money shot. Yes, Julie won, because of course she did. She's Julie. Also, if you ever get a chance to be in a role-playing game with Julie, do it, because she rolls really well. It kind of makes up for people like me who do not. I mean, I'm not like super cursed, but my rolls are a little bit all over the place. So the idea of if you're painting for something where photographs are a component or the main component, you definitely want to do this. You want to think about, okay, what angle is going to be the best photo? Like maybe I think it's this angle, and a nice profile, and shows the action in his legs a lot, but maybe I think the face is more important and I want to do that. So I kind of want to pick that and make sure that the painting choices I make look good here. Like even if they don't look amazing here, am I taking a photo from this angle? I mean, I do, because I'm weird like that, but I don't always post it. Like if it's weird looking, like if the shapes just look strange and you're not really getting any useful information from it, like I'll send it to my client so that they know that I painted the armpit or whatever, but I don't put that online, because how fun is that to look at? Where this side, from this side, he's still pretty cool to look at. And most miniatures are like that. There's going to be an angle or two where it's like, oh, well, that's like, if we look at her, actually she does work pretty good in all the angles. Where's Mr. Sir Scale? So if we look at like the shield side of Mr. Sir Scale, this is not a riveting angle of this character. I would want something like this where we're showing off the whole shield, or something like this where we're getting to see like the whole front of him, especially if he had a face. He doesn't, because he's wearing a helmet. So I would probably go with this, because it's like a nice angle for the sword and how I would choose to paint a sword. You get the cloth, you get, but when I'm painting, whether I was using real metal, real metallic paints or non-metallic metal, I would be keeping this in mind. Like, okay, so I want my hot spot on the helmet to be right there, and I want a really nice hot spot right there. And I want, maybe this is going to be the brightest face, and then this is going to be the secondary highlight on my sword. So I'm thinking about that as I'm making my choices here. Queenie told Julie that she can shout as much as she wants, and now Julie needs Queenie to say that to Bob, that she now has shouting permission. So I'm trying to make my choices with the big choices with where I'm putting the colors, making kind of the pattern on this guy with this angle in mind, with this being most likely to be the key angle. Now, depending on, does the quarterly contest still only allow you one photo? Because it used to be like that, and if you want to show the back, you like have to put a mirror in or something. But if it's something where you can submit multiple photos, you may want to have like a secondary or even a tertiary kind of angle where, I'm also thinking about making this look interesting. So I want this and this to look good for sure. And if this doesn't look amazing, I'm probably going to live with that. You can do a composite image now with all the photos that you like. So I'm not going for like super smooth perfection here, because like he's a textured guy, so why not just roll with that? And it'll be hopefully a little faster as well. But it's nice to have some textural difference. Like that's another kind of contrast. Having these smoother areas and then these kind of, it's almost like quiet and noisy is sort of how I think about it. You want to give someone's eye a place to rest. So as a rule, even if you could, and there are people who can, like completely cover something with freehand painted frescoes detail, you probably don't want to. You probably want to have some spots on the figure where people's eyes can just take a little break and not having to, kind of parse all that detail and figure out what's happening. because of the wow factor, you can sometimes get away with stuff like that. I think they're kind of like even painting houses. I don't know exactly how it works, but I think in Russia they're kind of painting houses where it's like this person paints the cloaks and this person paints the face or whatever. And they have, like, if you've ever seen a night that's like just crazy covered in freehand painted details, it might be one of these Russian things. Like, it was just not that a person posted it and said, hey, I did this, but it's just something you found floating around the internet. But from a compositional point of view, you need to let the eye have some spots where it doesn't have to work as hard. So that is, I mean, value is the most effective kind of contrast, the light versus dark, then hue. And what would I make number 3? Temperature, maybe? I mean, temperature and hue are like almost... They are separate, but kind of not really. Then saturation. Then you start getting into stuff like texture. But of course, anyone can take one of those individual pieces and, one of those individual kinds of contrast or techniques or whatever, and find a way to use it in an unusual way where it is the center of attention or whatever. Like any art guideline, rule, whatever, you're going to find stuff that doesn't do it. The guidelines are just helpful for if you're not confident about a choice you're making. The guidelines are rules, whatever you want to call it, are there for us to help. It doesn't mean it's the only way to do things, but if you're doing things and they aren't working out great, then maybe check out the guidelines. They have worked for many artists over many years for a reason. So when I say stuff like this, I'm not trying to stifle creativity or whatever. I'm just trying to give you ways to make things easier. Just think of the artists who would have crafted the cape, the cloak, the belt, etc. There's a break-even point on the cost of things that even an artist may not go beyond. I mean, all that kind of detail was certainly an important indicator of wealth in pre-industrial days. Just thinking about how long it takes just to make a shirt, just make a basic commoner's cotton tunic type shirt. If you think about how long that takes from hand, you're starting from a sheep or some flax plants. That just boggles my mind. And this is one of my reasons why I don't think all commoners and poor people and whatnot should be painted brown. If you've spent that long making something, and human beings love color, some of those commoners are going to take the time and the effort and maybe even a little bit of expense to make their clothes a little more interesting. And tapestries and illuminated manuscripts and stuff back me up on that. That's not just me theorizing randomly. I don't claim to be an expert by any means, but there's historical evidence and a lot of information about dyes and stuff. The really good colors, the really powerful colors, yes, those were professionally done and generally required a bit of cash to be a person to purchase them, which is the concept of color in general. You can get blue, reddish pink, like, so not like red, but like reddish pink, maroon, that kind of color, yellow, green. I mean, green, if you can get yellow and blue, which there are relatively common plants that do those, they just, interestingly, I don't know if that they always mix it together, but you dip like in the yellow and then you dip in the blue and you end up with something that's green. There is a series, and last time I checked it was on YouTube, but it's one of these things that it was on real TV, so somebody could come copyright claim it, I guess. I think it's called A Stitch in Time, and alas, there were only 6 episodes. I would have loved if there were more. But they look at clothing in some famous paintings. I mean, they're not like super famous, all of them, I guess, but there's Belle Dido, some gardener. I'm forgetting some of the other ones. But then they try to recreate those clothes the way they would have made them in the time period. And so they're talking to historians, dress historians, tailors, people who make the clothes. The reason I know about the green is the one episode with the gardener's outfit. I think that it was green and they dyed it that way, where they did the 2-vat dip. Because what they theorized is that it was actually like a leather coat or something, and they theorized that it was something that probably once belonged to a noble, but then as the clothes get too worn out, for nobles, they hand them down, and things get recut too. So, like, if you think about how much time and effort it takes to make clothing, people are not throwing things away until they fall apart. Like, you're handing it down, you're giving it to someone else down the social ladder, you're recutting it to fit a smaller person, you're cutting it into baby clothes, like you're using it for scraps, you're using it until it is not usable anymore, because it's just so much work to get that. Why would you? Daka Flocka Flame. I'm far from expert, but the books I read, medieval people, including peasants, painted and dyed everything in like bright colors. Yeah, everybody likes bright colors. I think it's human nature. We have this weird thing, especially so Victorian era, like the whole steampunk, brown is the new black, all that thing. That's just because of sepia photographs. The Victorians were actually like insanely colorful, willing to die to be colorful. They were using, arsenic green and other stuff that people, even then, the news started coming out that, hey, this ain't so great for you. But everyone's like, but it pretty. And human nature doesn't change that much. So people like color. We look for shiny shells and pretty things, and we figure out how to adorn ourselves with them, as well as our homes, or anything else that is important to us. Even the times when black was, like the religious movement that the Pilgrims came out of and stuff, the severe Protestant movements. That's kind of like, I didn't realize this until I started looking into this a bit. Most of those people were pretty well off, because black is actually hard to make, like true black. Instead of it being like kind of is really brown or kind of is really gray, true black is hard to make and therefore more expensive. So it was like a very modest way of showing off the whole pilgrim plainness deal. It was like, okay, I like that. So I have, you can see on, is this one palette cam? Yeah. So I made one brighter mix that I'm going to just put on a few places on him, especially the face, maybe the hands. I'm not going to go any brighter on the legs. I maybe even should go a little less bright. But I want to have more attention on the face, so using lighter colors draw the eye, and more saturated colors draw the eye. So if I were to adjust saturation here, I think I would probably do it the glaze way. But I'm going to wait to do that until we see how the tealy part works. Because that's the now things clash part of the equation. So if we look at Mr. Actual Lizard, this is a very light color. I mean, this is pretty close to my vampire pallor here. But I'm going to have to go a little darker for the sake of bringing out the shapes and all that stuff. Particularly since these are very protruding scales or horns or whatever up on his head. So I'm going to take some risks. I'm going to have to be careful. It's going to be a bit like when I was doing Rocky, and I'm probably going to need to be less saturated than I think I need to do. But yeah, if you're at all into clothing or anything like that, look up A Stitch in Time. It was like a BBC or something program. But people often post these on YouTube, which is how I saw it. And I think there's lots of fruitful material in there for like a D&D campaign setting, world, quests. You know, like dyes are that valuable. Maybe your PCs need to go to this weird place in the world and get the dye stuff. So, as a starting point, which one? I feel like the more blue one is closer to what if you made what is on the real lizard darker. And then the other thing is the further things are apart sometimes on the color wheel, the less likely they are to clash. So this is greenier, and we've already got like this is a bluer green, we've already got yellow green and kind of dull brown. Like I think this is going to be harder to make work, and also not as much contrast because I'm moving further away on the color wheel. I think that this Siren Song is going to be a better color. But clearly this is, you know, I don't think that's the right color. Like I think we need to dial it back a little. And there are a variety of ways to dial things back. If I wanted to use the color complement, what would I do? Get the old color wheel. Okay, my original, I bought a second color wheel because I'm gonna rip it apart. Because sometimes I want to show you guys like just this whole thing and not have to spin the gizmos. But since this is a brand new one, I don't want to rip this one apart. And I want some of the gizmos. So there's the thing that tells me about complementary. And I would need red orange if I wanted to use complementary color. I would use red or orange, but I may try to use gray instead. Pendrake is saying black was least expensive cloth Protestants trying to be plain. What I heard is that black was more expensive than you might think because it's harder to dye, to get real black. Now I don't have like red orange. I do have lava orange. So let's see what happens. Because often when something says a compliment, like I was way too nervous about experimenting when I first started painting, and I was like, well, I don't know what the exact color complement of this thing is. Near complements usually do the job too. So let's see what happens. Apparently that, although it looks potent, that's not super potent orange. But there's some yellowy in there, so I'm turning it greener, so I may not be doing what I want to do. Because what I'm doing is getting closer to that, which I said I didn't want. So that is not the way we're going to desaturate this Siren Song. Because everything in there has some yellow, and eventually that starts making green. I will instead use the literal graying things down method. I saw a thing a while back on why the British military wore red coats as their uniform, and it turned out because the British government got a really good deal on red dye, which is the most plausible explanation. That's hilarious. Pendrake had missed the earlier thing. So when I started looking into this clothing dyeing and all that stuff, I was looking stuff up, and they were saying that since true black, dyeing a true black is kind of difficult to do, instead of gray or dark, instead of being dark gray or dark brown, like being black, that it's actually a little more of a luxury item. So it's kind of a way of looking modest and plain, but still showing off your wealth. Which I thought was interesting. I think I lightened it too much, but we can deal with that. So since I have all the colors on my palette, let's go to palette cam for a minute. And I feel like my instinct is correct, that this is going to be too clashy. And this is a better... It's like a weird color. It's not the obvious color you would think of to go with those. But it can be made to work. One hopes. I'm just going to use blue liner to make shadows. And I got my vampire pallor to make lighter versions. But for simplicity's sake, I'll probably start with a darker version. I mean, it's almost like, is it too dull? Maybe we live a little. Maybe just a little. Purple was expensive back in the day on our planet, but it could all be different on Sim D&D World. Yes, and I think that's, you can kind of take inspiration from what happened, like it's that reddish purple, I think in particular, that was expensive, Tyrian purple, that they get from snails, because you need like 4 billion snails to do it. But you could say like glow in the dark or color shifting, or like some neat color property in your fantasy world that the PCs have to go off and fight these like very high level scary monsters to get the material to make this nifty dye that all the rich people are dying to wear. Dying, haha. They're not dying. They're sending the PCs off to die. Oh my goodness, did we ever have to pay through the nose for style in one campaign I played about 25 years ago, so it's like crying. I mean, it also makes a spell like Mend seem much cooler than it may seem initially. Because it's like, well, if it's this much effort to make things, if you have an easy way to fix them, this is very good. All right, so does the theory work? I feel like, yeah, we're gonna get some attention on his face because he's got a wacky color thing happening. Do I want his loincloth to match his web? If you were a lizard, would you buy a loincloth that matched your mohawk? No, I think I probably want more of a blue-gray. The haggling was real. The DM loved to roleplay merchants, so we'd spend a whole session on town trips to get materials and then find artisans to make the things we wanted. The DM had done a lot of research and definitely wanted to make use of it. I had a character who I had, I'd like read some of the rules and stuff, but I hadn't gone nuts with it. So I knew like monster body parts were useful for things, but I had not memorized which monster body parts or anything. So she just kind of compulsively collected monster body parts. I was like, well, this could be useful for something someday. I'm gonna grab it and stick it in something. I think eventually I found a magic item that preserved things, and that was like very special because then I could carry even more monster things that might come in useful someday. In related news, my basement is just a disaster that I need to clear a lot of crap out of. In highly related news, I'm going to mix some of that in there. Because that's what I was talking about when you go lighter, if you don't want to completely desaturate, you also add some of the more saturated thing in. So I could have actually gone straight that, maybe. Maybe not. Now the trick will be actually painting before the paint dries. Pendrake, no lizards have fashion sense. The DMs were a couple and both of them were librarians. Oh, so there was just much knowledge and researching all of the time. I found the place I missed. There's always got to be at least one. That is a strap on a scale. Alright. Oh, nope, that is not my next size color. This is my next size color. Oh, is he in focus? I rearranged my windows so it's easier for me to see chat, but now it's a little harder for me to see my preview window. Did you enjoy the haggling and role playing out where your stuff comes from instead of it just being at the magic gap or whatever, the medieval gap? I think I actually want this whole section to be lighter in value than I had been making it. Let me go back over it a little. Because, I mean, it's really light on my sample lizard, and part of my contrast was having the Bane khaki brown body be darker, and then these other two colors be lighter as well as more saturated. So I think I need to lighten up a little. Zachariah, it was interesting most of the times, other times it was quite pedantic. Yeah. I could see where they could get easily carried away with stuff that was fascinating to them and might not be fascinating to everybody involved. It's like sometimes I like a DM where you don't have to role play out every little bit of travel every time. It's like it's okay to say, and 3 weeks pass and then you're there. Sometimes it's cool to do the travelogue type thing, but sometimes it's nice to take advantage of the fact that we are not real people doing a real thing and skip the boring parts. I'll have to figure out what that one lizard that I found that just had the crazy color scheme is called. Because it was like Mother Nature was doing the good drugs that day. That lizard has a lot going on. Maybe I want to accent the... There's like a little lip where the plate overlaps the other type of skin. And I'm not going to do a ton on this side, even with a very generic sun from above. Not much is going to be happening here. I think I need to do a little more than I've done. It would be, if I was painting this and trying to make it look really badass, I probably would have decided the sun was coming from like here. So this whole side would be lighter than that side. But I'm actually kind of out of practice on doing more directional lighting. I'd gotten into it for a while, and then I guess I started doing something else and stopped practicing that as much. But it can be, it's another way of making something dramatic without having to, you know, it can work with a wide variety of color schemes and types of characters and stuff, because it's just the light. It's just the light they're standing in rather than what nature or magic or job description choices have dictated. Kind of like OSL without having an O. And it doesn't have to be quite as ba-bam. Pendrake read about a new species of gecko today that was a new lizard unknown to science. Huh. Where did they find this new lizard? Where had he been hiding from the science guys all this time? Oh, if any of you do not watch Zefrank, so it's Z-E Frank 1 on YouTube, he does super hilarious and yet also factual videos about animals. Like, very hilarious. So because this is the back view, I don't mind that this tail is going to be probably more interesting than some of the other stuff on his back, because I can choose a different place than the face, and that's not going to cause a lot of problems. But in the front view, I would like to avoid that if I can. North of Hanoi is where the geckos would. Zachary said, I bet the other geckos knew. Oh, they knew, but they were holding back because the insurance is even cheaper from the unknown. Yes, that is what Zefrank do. And Zachariah is pointing out that you should particularly watch the clown shrimp one, and then learn to say it, like me. Yeah, the recent one on sharks was like, okay, those are some visuals I was not expecting. That happened. Hey, Grey Moster, how are you today? I am painting. And for anyone else who came in a little later and is wondering, this is the figure that I'm painting today, which is the miniature of the month for June. I assume he'll still be sold after June, but currently the way the miniature of the month works, if you buy a qualifying amount of things on reapermini.com, you get one of these dudes for free. But then, also for the benefit of people who came in later, next month, which is rapidly approaching, is going to be this guy, this awesome guy. And both of these miniatures are 3D printed. Like it's some kind of mass production 3D printing. It boggles my mind, but here we are. So I have not cleaned. I cleaned up the Lizard Man just a little. It didn't actually take a lot. There were a couple of little struts that just popped right off, and then a few of these little dots that I had to file down, mostly on his bow. Excuse me. And there's what I mean about like a little strut that's hanging off. But I have multiple copies of these, so I'm going to show them so that no one thinks I cherry picked like the one guy that didn't have any gribblies. Like there's that. There's one there. I will probably clean one of these up. Maybe next week, maybe the week after. We'll see. This one does have a slightly bent thorn compared to the others, but I think that actually fits. It looks like a thorn, so I'm okay with it. But I think I could bend it with a bit of heat if I were not okay with it. But the lack of mold lines is just like the best. The best. Plus being hard resin, you just scrape to clean, and I prefer that kind of cleaning method. So since I wanted to prime this guy, I did it. Well, I was supposed to do it yesterday so that the primer would have a little time to cure. But in actuality, I did it this morning. We ended up going out to see Guardians of the Galaxy and then going out to dinner. And then I was just old and lazy and didn't do it when I got home. All right, see, that was too much. Now that just looks kind of fake ridge, so dial it back a little. Microliter values. My lightest one, which is Vampire Pallor with a touch of Siren Song. And try to keep this to smaller areas. For just that last little bit of oomph. I could have painted these kind of streaky too. Like it would have. They're good scales to do like a streaky thing. But as I was saying earlier, there's a lot of textural stuff happening on this guy. I'm okay with these scales being a bit quieter of a texture so that the eye has somewhere to rest. But I do think that I want to. That is not blue liner. Add some lining, especially on this side, where it's shadowed. There is a little artifact there that I didn't clean up. If you can, I don't even know if you can see it on the camera, so it's right there. So it's not that big a one, especially since it's in a place that I'm darkening. And yeah, I want to line the transition here too. It is like an overlapping plate, and I've painted it that way on the light side. I would like it to appear that way on the shadow side. think I probably need liner in between on that side as well. And I'm debating whether it needs to be lighter. Am I going to paint the base like it is made of honeycomb? Of the bee, I assume, not the lizard. The base actually has little flowers on it. So I think it's going to be more like a wilderness meadow. It is very fitting that he's on a hex, though. Well, she, I guess. Aren't all the... Is it like ants? Are all the worker bees female? I can't remember now. I'm continually battling ants, so I know more about them. Now they're in our mailbox. Because sure, why not? Take all your little larvae and eggs and crap and put it in my mailbox. Just because it's raining. So my poor husband went out to get the mail a couple of days ago and had quite a shock. And he cleared them out, and then it rained again, and more came back. So that's an ongoing project. Then I just found that one here, which means I'm going to have to go scan my whole house and see if they've invaded again. Hopefully that was just a scout. It's like, we give you this lovely yard. Go be there. Don't be in my house. Now here I may regret not making a different value of liner, but on the other hand, it will add even more contrast. This is where I want all the contrast. So hopefully it'll work. Kind of stop being little plates and turn into the cool mohawk. So I'm not going to go in between the mohawk. I'm just going to kind of like darken it towards the base a little. Maybe even darker, in fact. I think that's good enough. So I don't know, do you think this color contrasting, but hopefully working together in their contrasting way, conflicting, works? Did I capture the, what did I say? Blue spiny, the blue spiny lizard. Did I capture the color scheme? I guess let me know what you think. I should probably check what time we're at. Oh, we are getting close. So I don't know that I'll start another section of him. Maybe just work on add a little of the detailing. He's got teeth. To bring back out. not just teeth, fangs. Because he's got the bow and then the bite claw. Oh right, I was going to do these little head divot things that I'm sure have a technical name also. Is it their ears? I was going to make them with the teal too. I don't have any blue left. Pendrakes thinks the drones are genderless. But I don't know. I have to look at it. But to be fair, if you're big people, you can probably do whatever the DM says you can do. I'll have to think about whether I think the blue eyes work, or if it'd be cool to come in with, like, you know, orange and really have them go bam. I had this one teacher in school who had really pale blue eyes like a husky. So I've just always thought of that as kind of creepy. Well, there's a good question. If that's his, like, you know, if that's a claw-like type thing, or horn, why not just make his claws that color too? Also, it's right there on my palette, making it easy. Oops, I went too far. I went too far, as I often do. I got mixed up between knuckle and claw. Who cares about those ones? We can't see them. I mean, if I were painting this for, like, ReaperCon, I would totally paint those ones. I will pretend to be rational and not do that. Just a little smidge lighter, I think, for the really pointy parts. Because after he gets you with his bow, he's still got the claw bite. Even though it's, like, insanely humid, still my paint dries out. I don't know. I think the rule is if you want paint not to dry out, that is when it dries out. I don't think it has anything to do with the weather. Alright, so I'm not unhappy with him. It's kind of an interesting vibe. I mean, I do now have to figure out what all his other things are. I mean, this is clearly a turtle shell, which is like a really cool little touch. But what color I want his leather and cloth and whatnot to be, I don't know. But if you have ideas for colors for his accessories and whatnot that would work well with this weirdo color scheme, feel free to let me know in the chat, in a DM, whatever. If you have a request for something that I do, I'll take Valender's request under considerations, maybe see if I can find some other way to do it. I don't know. Valander, for those who came later, Valander suggested that I go through the submissions to the quarterly contest and talk about what I liked about them, even liked specifically. But I'm very leery of doing any kind of critique on people who haven't expressly volunteered for that. I think I get why people ask for stuff like that, because it is super useful to hear kind of critiques for a variety of different kinds of miniatures, particularly that thing where we're talking about how everybody's painted the same miniature, so it'd be interesting to see the comparisons. But unless people have volunteered for it, I feel like there could be somebody who'd be like, that's not why I entered this, you didn't say that's what that was for, and I don't want to open that can of worms. Which is likewise at ReaperCon, why, even though people have suggested that the judges do a panel and give large-scale critiques with some of the miniatures that are entered in the contest, this is why we do not do that. Even if you only say nice things, because you might think something is a nice thing, and the person who made it might have been trying to do the opposite thing, or, maybe you say, oh, this is just such a nice, cheery interpretation of this figure, and they were trying to do something scary and imposing, and then it still seems to be like an insult. So it's just, and I'm not judging people for being sensitive or fragile about their work or anything like that. We've all had those moments, I think, where we just, there's a lot in the world, there's a lot in our lives. We're not always in a place where we're open to something coming from like an unexpected angle, and you're like, oh, I didn't want that, I didn't sign up for that, I'm not interested in that. So yes, as Greymonster says, it seems to be normal not to do critiques unless asked. And even when people ask, you kind of, if you don't know them, it's not unusual to kind of do is there a particular area, or you want me to give you like a critique, or just mention a few things, like even when someone asks, you still sometimes kind of have to gauge, okay, what kind of what are they going for here? That because maybe they worked super hard on the sword, and then you start talking about all these other things, and they don't really care. What they want to know is what you think of the sword. So finding out that that's what they want to know with a few questions up front can help everybody involved. Even if, the sword is not what's having the main effect on the end result. If that's what they want to know about, then it's better to talk about that. And because they were trying to do something particular, and they want to know whether they accomplished their goals, or if there's something they could do more or less to get where they were trying to go, kind of thing. So to me, like, I love getting feedback, and even getting the tough feedback. Although I will say there are a couple of people I know who give like the most thorough critiques, and I do not ask them to do that for me. I mean, I don't ask them to do that for me all the time, also because they're going in so deep that it's taking a lot of their time, and a lot of other people want the same thing, so I'm trying not to monopolize their time. But also, I have to know that I'm in a headspace where I am okay hearing they are gonna really identify the things I did that sucked. Like, they're gonna get in there, they're gonna find things, ask me questions about stuff I did not think of and should have thought of. So I only do that when I know that I'm in a headspace where I can take it, and that I'm interested in maybe working on some of the stuff that they're talking about. Because sometimes you just, it's like, well, it's just my job, or I'm just trying to finish this army, or I just got to get this done because our campaign is going to this country in 2 weeks, and I need to have these things ready. So sometimes you're not even like working, even if you're someone who's interested in learning and improving as part of the hobby, which is something that I like to do. But not everyone does, and that's useful to know too. But so it's good to know yourself, but it's also good to not necessarily assume that everybody knows themselves, which I guess is how you end up as a person who does critiques, that you're like, okay, they may not know what they're asking for. Like this, I may be the first person they've ever asked for feedback. Like at ReaperCon, that totally happens. We get new people every year that this is the first, they've only been painting for a few months. This is their first con. This is their first contest. It's like, I can't go in there with both barrels. I mean, like that's not what they want, and that's not what they need. Like, I need to be encouraging as well as saying, hey, if you tried this, I bet it would look even cooler, which is how I try to approach it when I'm talking with somebody who's pretty new to the hobby. Let's see. Gray Moser said, the best thing I learned from attending Toastmasters, how to do evaluations, and it has all that. So where you kind of where you feel the person out about what kind of feedback they're looking for. I'm not always great at that. I jump in a lot, but I've learned a lot about, asking those questions and trying to tailor the commentary to what the person's most interested in hearing about. I often sit next to Michael Proctor, and he's really good at that. I mean, he's really good at critique in general, but he's really good at taking a moment to say, okay, let's negotiate and figure out what it is you're most interested in, and make sure that I work on addressing that for you. But anyway, so as not at all shocking any of you that I did not finish. I may come back to it, because that 3D printed stuff is so nice and crisp, and all the details, and it's nice. I likes it. So I may come back to him, but I may leave him sit a little bit and try to get to more, because I haven't done a critique on the show where I critique my own things and then do the repaint, and I've been saying I'm going to do that forever, and hopefully ever will happen. But some of them require a little work outside of the show, and I'm still negotiating with my neck about sitting and looking down. All the activity, like if you just think about all the activities like to do that involve this, it's so many more than you think. But yes, we're gonna let We're gonna let Quinty find us a raid. Reaper Miniatures just posted in the chat if you wanted to know where to get cool T-shirts. And Grey Mouse is confirming that was part of what they learned at Toastmasters is, they were scrolling. Talk to the person first, see what they want to get out of it, get to know them, and wrap it with the compliment sandwich, where you gotta start and end with something on a more positive note. Often helps people take the pill of what you said in the middle. Zachariah M. I tend to ask the recipient for what they're looking for straight. Do you want the top 3, an intermediate critique, or a deep scrub? Hey, Slayer Street, you're very welcome. Zachariah is right. There are wonderful T-shirts there. I'm not wearing a Reaper T-shirt today, but I will wear one next time. I forgot. You guys, even if I was, you can't see, because the level of my camera, and I don't have much impact into where that camera goes. But you are going to be rating art of Mike Disney, and please say hi and spread the Reaper love. And I hope I see you here next week. Bye, everybody.